Welcome to Minotaur Demon Lord Base Part 1. This is Christian with Barking Dog Studios. In today's video, I'm going to be painting up a Minotaur Demon Lord base for a commission. And right there is the base that I've put together. It's the round dais part of the base is what comes with the Minotaur, and the oval and the heads and skulls and weapons that are on there come from various other miniature packs, just something I threw together to spruce up a little bit. And right here I'm spraying on some P3 paints. It's Minotaur white base. Put it in an airbrush with some flow improver and some airbrush thinner. And right here I'm spraying over some Badger Minotaur ghost tint brown, and I end up overdoing it. If I would have just hit it with one initial light coat, I think it would have been great, but I ended up overdoing it. So later I actually come back in and paint over that. But the Minotaur paint, the ghost tint, is very glossy and has a very smooth texture to it, and other paint doesn't like to stick to it very well. So what I end up doing before I paint over it is spraying it with a satin varnish. Alright, so here I haven't redone that floor part of the base yet, but I'm getting ready to paint the dais, and I'm using, again, P3. It's gray coat gray. Let me sped up the video a little bit here. The oval part of the base was actually to a Atlantis Miniatures base, and the weapons come from a company that's not together anymore called Warlord Games. I think it was Warlord Games, maybe bought them out. I can't remember, but it's from an old model kit for putting together an orc army, and then some pieces that were for putting together a skeletal army. And not in this video, but in a later video, I'm going to go in and add some blood around one of the heads that's on the base. There's a little skeleton arm hanging off the side there. Oh, and there's a couple of items that are actually from a Reaper accessories sprue. Also, there's a book and a little treasure chest. Now, in the holes where the Minotaur glues on, I actually have some silly putty, and it's a way of masking it so no paint gets down inside there. And on the base of the Minotaur, on the slots on his feet that fit down in there, I also have some silly putty. And that way, when I go to glue the Minotaur to the base, I just get a better adhesion. I get the actual plastic to plastic glue bond. Whereas if there's paint inside there, and or there's paint on the Minotaur side, when you glue them together, basically what you get is just paint glued to paint, and sometimes it doesn't make a good bond and will come apart later. And there I'm just dry brushing some troll blood highlight onto that dais, and I put it on the top of I think it was like a Powerade cap or something, because I didn't want to put the paint on my wet palette, and I didn't want to continue dipping into the paint pot. So I just used a Powerade cap. And here for that other highlight that I'm putting on, I think I was actually, again, I went with the Minotaur white base. The Minotaur white base actually has kind of a cream color to it, almost a really, really light khaki. But when on the top of that gray, it really just appears kind of white. It's kind of a dirty white. You know, white you might find on a floor in a dungeon somewhere. It's not a, you know, kind of a more of a texture look. And there I'm just going back with another highlight. And that is Sadie barking at the door. But this early in the morning, they're usually a little too energetic for me to let in the house, so she's giving me a piece of her mind. But that is why we are called Barking Dog Studio. And for that other highlight, I'm pretty sure, because I didn't get a good look at the bottle and I can't really remember, but I'm pretty sure I just went with the Minotaur White highlight, keeping within that family of paints. And there's the book from the Reaper sprue. I'm just painting up the pages on it, and you can see I picked out some of the other items. I've got the handles for the swords worked in. Now, when I sprayed over the white over that Badger Minotaur, it was just a thin layer of white, so you still see some of that kind of reddish brown from that Minotaur ghost tint kind of bleeding through the paint, but I just decided it looked much better, and so I just ran with it. And later I'll be throwing down a wash of a Citadel. I think it was Agrath's Earthshade. Let me look at the bottle here. Yep, Agrath's Earthshade. And it was my first time using Agrath's Earthshade also. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with that as a wash. I think it turns out later, or turns out better later. So on the Minotaur, he has some battle damage, and I just thought it would look good if the debris around him indicated, you know, that he has been in battle. Some of it recently, some of it not so recently. And here we go with some steel, some model color oily steel, using it for the weapons. Get the blades on those little swords there. And earlier on his helmet I actually used, let's see, what was it? It's one I don't use very often. It was Army Painter plate metal. Sorry if the audio or video jumped kind of weird. There was a weird glitch in it and I had to pause it. I'm kind of still new to editing and getting things put together, so but earlier when I was painting that orc face, I was just going with some scale color. It was from the fantasy game line, and it was Harvester Flesh for the base, and then for the highlight is Moonray Flesh. There, I'm using some again, it was scale color. It was the black metal for the base on the axe. And yes, I have a very squeaky office chair. Sorry about that. Probably need to get a better mic eventually too, but all in good time, all in good time. And there I was just kind of mixing a couple of colors. I was mixing Vallejo silver from the Air Game line with some of that scale color black metal to go in and edge the weapons with, so there's a transition from the regular blade and the actual edge on both the axe and the short swords. There I'm shaking up some, I believe it was Glorious Gold. Yes, Glorious Gold from Game Air out of the Vallejo line. Touching up the quiver. And the quiver was from that skeleton's sprue. My next video, I'll make sure that I give you guys the actual company's name, but I think it was Warlord bought out the company I actually bought them from, and I don't think they're in production anymore, but I'll do a little bit of digging. Now there, I was trying to come up with a design for that book to make it look like it was some kind of spell book, and I just ended up going with the star, but later when the paint dries, I actually come back in and actually paint over it with some more arcane blue, which is the color I used from the P3 line for the book. And here you get to see me touching up the Minotaur a little bit. I glued a skull again from that same weapon sprue, or not weapon sprue, but that same model line that for the skeleton army. The Minotaur just needed something in his hand, so I went with this skull that has the jaw open on it. And I didn't really prime the skull, I just kind of glued it in place, cleaned up some of the paint off the Minotaur's hand right there, glued the skull in place, and now I'm just going down straight white, which very rarely will you ever see me apply paint without some kind of primer. But that skull did get my treatment of isopropyl alcohol just to make sure everything would stick to it real good. I have another video all about how I clean up stuff for painting and assembly. But basically I just scrubbed him with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol and an old toothbrush, glued him in place, and now I'm throwing on some Minotaur white base. No, actually I take that back. For all the bone I actually used the Armor Painter skeleton bone. And there you see me throwing down some Agrax Earthshade. Agrax Earthshade. It's not as red as the ghost tint was, but some of that ghost tint's still bleeding through. So as that's dried, and as I'm looking at the dried version of it here in front of me, some of the red still kind of bleeds through, so I still end up with it get somewhat of a ready brown. Excuse me, I mean ruddy or ready brown. Ruddy, is that a word? Rudy? I don't know, it's a reddish brown. In the center of the dais, I've gone in and painted just with model color bronze. It's actually one of my favorite metallics. My favorite metallic paints of all time. Model color bronze. I had to intentionally make myself stop using it because I went through a phase there for about a year where I used it very heavily on any kind of buckle for a miniature or the pommel and cross piece on a lot of swords. Here we're just about to wrap it up. If you like the video, please click like, subscribe, and share. And a special thanks to my patrons, Chris and Caitlin. Bark on, puppies.